What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Rantin Review. And given the fact that in just about 10 weeks' time, we are going to be starting the 11th and final season of The Walking Dead, one of the most popular and most controversial and most watched TV series of the last decade or so, I thought might as well go back and do a recap of seasons 1 through 10, especially for people who haven't watched The Walking Dead ever, or people who dropped off in prior seasons and may be picking it back up and want to get a quick recap of what they've missed without having to spend 13, 30, 40, 50 hours, however long it would take to go back and binge watch the entire series on Netflix. So what I'm going to do is give a breakdown of each season, the most important points that you pretty much need to know, and we're going to do some interesting little things along the way. But before we get to that, though, I want to remind you guys that this is YouTube, so I do appreciate it if you guys do hit the like button and the notification bell and the subscription button. If you do hit the like button, I will, in the next video, recap for season 2, yell out the word Carl for every single like that this video gets. So, hey, why not?
Carl? Is that how he says it?
Carl?
Carl. 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 We're gonna fight this thing together. Everybody. Carl.
So, the season 1 premiere, which was a pilot episode that aired on AMC, came at a time when AMC wasn't the big powerhouse that it has been and became because of shows like The Walking Dead and Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad and so on and so forth. But The Walking Dead came and did something unique. It gave a different spin on the zombie apocalypse because you'd seen, probably hundreds of zombie movies and TV shows at the time, but The Walking Dead did something different. It was humanizing it. Now, of course, the show is based off of the comic book that had been running for quite a while, so there were fans of the comic books, which was fairly popular, who were getting into the show, and people who became fans of the TV show, and we start to see very early on in season 1 how things kind of diverge. One of the very first signs of that is the opening shot of the show, which has really nothing to do in the canon or the timeline. I think it's just there to establish what kind of show you're watching. And it's Rick, who's in his sheriff outfit, and he's walking amongst these cars and all these dead walkers, these dead bodies we knew at the time. And he sees a little girl, and she turns around, and she's obviously zombified. So Rick, in shocking fashion, shoots the little girl through the head. She falls along for Teddy Bear and her little slippers, and that lets you know what kind of show you're watching. It's going to be gross, it's going to be graphic, and we're not going to be afraid to kill any kids. So as a flashback, we go and see Rick and Shane having a very interesting conversation that establishes their friendship. Also establishes Rick and his family and his relationship with Lori that isn't quite right, and Shane is being kind of this confirmed lifetime bachelor, kind of a ladies' man. They go on a case, track down some robbers. There's a big shootout. Rick gets shot. He gets shot once, but it hits his vest. He's like, all right, don't tell Lori. And then as he's doing that, he gets shot again because the police officers at the dispatch said that there were only 2 suspects when it turned out to be 3. Rick gets shot clean this time and winds up in a hospital. And when he wakes up, not only is Shane not there, not only is his flowers wilted, but he realizes that something very, very wrong has happened. The infamous shot of him walking through the hallways in his hospital gown and seeing "Don't open, dead inside," which will be played upon many times, is one of the most iconic shots of the entire series. Rick sees that, something's weird. People are walking around dead. There's people dead laid out everywhere. And one thing about season 1 I will note is that they really did give you that sense of what it would be like if you woke up in a zombie apocalypse, and just the desolation and the destruction and the decay of the world as it was, if something like that would happen. We also get our first shot of an infamous helicopter, which would appear a lot throughout season 1 and 2, actually. And the helicopter would be a symbol that would carry on with Rick throughout the series. Meanwhile, we find out that Lori and Carl, who are Rick's wife and son, are with Shane, and Shane is protecting them with his camp of survivors. Shane's also laying a pipe to Lori and being a daddy to Carl, so he's kind of replaced his best friend Rick, thinking that Rick was dead. We find out later that Shane had told Lori that Rick had died, and Lori's not too happy about it, But hey, for right now, they're having fun rolling around in the dirt. Rick, meanwhile, goes back to the house. He's hoping that he can find Coral and Lori there. He finds out and uses his detective skills to figure out that they actually survived. They weren't killed because Lori took all of their photo albums and everything with her. So he's going out looking for his family, but he's so exhausted and so confused at what's going on. He comes across another walker and then sees that this guy who's walking through the street gets shot through the head, and he also gets assaulted by a little boy. The little boy turns out to be Dwayne, who is there along with his father, Morgan. And we get the first introduction of Morgan and Rick, who will be significant characters throughout the series, on again and off again. Morgan effectively acts as the exposition for us to let us and Rick know what is going on in the world, that the dead are walking. There's certain problems going on, that there's no military, there's no help coming, and they've been held up in their house. We also get the very sad backstory about Morgan's wife and Dwayne's mother dying, and the fact that he couldn't pull the trigger on her. And Dwayne just doesn't seem like he's going to be ready for this world. Morgan's a little bit ready. They teach Rick how to take down walkers. We see Rick's first walker kill with a bat. But after that's all done, they decide to go their separate ways because Rick wants to find his family. So he gets to CB, he gives Morgan one and says, look, I'm going to call you every single day. I'll be on this channel. Check in with me. I'll let you know where I am. Morgan goes back with his son to their house. He tries to take down his wife, but Morgan can't do it, and we will find out the consequences of this in later seasons. Meanwhile, Rick has this brilliant idea of heading towards the city, which turned out not to be a good idea, where he comes across riding on his horse to an entire street full of walkers, crawls underneath a tank, almost gets himself killed, gets into the tank, almost makes himself deaf, but then he is hearing on the radio the voice of somebody we will all come to know and love, who will be known as Glenn. Glenn helps Rick escape. He joins up with their crew. We get to meet Merle. You get nothing like a good old racist to make your movie or show really work. So Merle's the evil, terrible racist. We've also got stereotypical T-Dog, Jackie, Andrea, who a lot of comic book fans would know to be quite a significant character, Morales, and a couple of other people. They go back and forth about what to do with Merle, who's trying to run roughshod, but Officer Rick is here, and he kind of one-ups Merle. Merle winds up getting handcuffed to the roof. The team has to leave. They don't know how they're going to get out of there. We then get our first use of walker guts as Rick and Glenn cover themselves in walker guts to kind of walk to get the cars so they can come back and pick everybody else up. However, the rain kind of interferes with that, which we also see how The Walking Dead kind of does these, and this would be a staple of the show where there's a plan, but the plan's always going to go wrong, and then it's how is our crew going to get out of the fact that they had a plan, it's falling apart, and they have to improvise. It happens all the time. After all this, they all make it back to the camp, leaving Merle handcuffed on the roof, which doesn't do any good for his brother, Daryl Dixon, who we first meet here after a deer has been eaten by a walker. Daryl was tracking the deer. Everybody comes around trying to beat up the walker. They're all stomping and kicking it. And Daryl shoots it in the head. It's like, come on, people. You got to go for the head. Don't y'all know nothing? He also has one of my favorite joke lines in the entire series when he's kind of getting chastised by Dale, who we'll talk about in a second, and he gives this response.
I'm down, son. That's not helping.
What do you know about it, old man? You take that stupid hat and go back down Golden Pond.
Rick has this great reunion with his family and Shane. Shane's looking a little like, yeah, I'm happy to see you, but at the same time, I thought I was replacing you, so Shane's a little conflicted, let's just say. We immediately start seeing the problems with Rick and Lori and how possibly Shane is more in line with Lori's thinking than Rick is. And Rick wants to go back and save Merle. Lori and Shane are like, what are you doing? You're going back to save this piece of crap? And Rick's desire to be a hero overrides the fact that it's two conflicting thoughts. Rick says he's got to do right, but at the same time, he's the father. He just got back with his family. He should stay with his family. But Rick, of course, being a hero, decides to go off with a team to go back and get Merle Dixon. That's not the only reason, too. Rick had a whole bag of guns that he got from the police station earlier that he dropped in the street when he was encountered by the walkers at the tank. So they go back to get the guns and to get Merle, but they find that Merle has cut his hand off and let himself free, and that's the last we'll see of Merle Dixon in season 1. The team gets themselves in a lot of trouble. Glenn gets kidnapped by a group of Vatos. They go make a deal with a group of Vatos. We meet our first other group, and it turns out to be less dramatic than we thought it was going to be.
Let me find it. This is medicine.
Felipe, go take care of it, okay? And take your grandmother with you.
Well,
Meanwhile, back at the camp, Lori's pissed at Shane because he's the one that told her that Rick was dead, and she basically says, "Stay away from me and my son." Shane gets really upset, and meanwhile, he sees a good avenue to take it out on. Carol, who's one of the most popular characters in the entire series, at this point in time is not the Carol we would know later on. She's very mousy. She's this abused wife whose big, burly, ignorant, stupid husband, Ed, is sitting there watching all the women do all the cleaning and cooking. There's a lot of stuff in the episode, in season 1, that 10 years later would not fly to today's PC culture. But the women are doing the laundry. Ed's giving them crap, being the chauvinist pig that he is. He winds up hitting, which gives Shane the perfect opportunity to take out his aggression. He saves Carol at first, which is a cool thing, but then he keeps hitting Ed. A lot. He goes way too far, and Carol's upset about this because she knows once Ed is a little bit healed up, that ass whooping that Shane gave Ed is going to be visited onto Carol because Ed is going to blame Carol for him getting his ass whooped, and she is terrified. She doesn't have to be terrified for too long because a group of walkers winds up invading the camp, the first of many times that our camp and our team's little homestead is going to be invaded by walkers. It happens a lot in the series. This is the first time, and we lose a lot of people, including the weirdo Jim, who got bit during the whole thing and was having premonitions and was digging holes. That guy was kind of crazy. I know his character was more expanded in the comic book, but he had premonitions and had been digging graves for people because he kind of knew this was going to happen. We also see the very beginnings of Carol and Daryl's relationship here, as Daryl's witnessing the fact that Carol was abused and what that really means for her when she was destroying Ed's walker body. After Shane and Lori and Rick complain about and argue and go back and forth about whether or not it was a good thing that Rick went for the weapons, because if he hadn't, they would have been there to protect the camp. But if they hadn't gone and gotten the weapons, they wouldn't have had the weapons to handle the walkers. And this is, again, another thing that you'll see in The Walking Dead a lot, where there's no real one right answer. You can see it from a lot of different perspectives. Shane may have been right. Rick may have been right. You're never really going to know what happened. They decide to split up and go to the CDC. Morales, who is a character who is technically part of the original crew, and we won't see him again for way later in the series, but he takes his family, they go off in a different direction. Our main crew goes to the CDC. They see it's been overrun. They wind up getting inside, though, and meeting this doctor named Jenner, who we get a little bit of flashbacks to before the group gets there. He's trying to find a cure, but he's a clumsy, bumbling idiot and nowhere near as smart as his wife. So he winds up destroying the last bit of samples, the last bit of hope humanity has to possibly curing this thing. Rick makes this great plea outside of the CDC to let them in, and then he lets them in, and Jenner tells him, once those doors close, they're never going to open again, which he meant. The crew thinks that they found a nice place. Again, more showers, more food. Shane tries to rape Lori because he's obsessed. She winds up scratching him. Everybody notices it. And during dinner and food and everybody's kind of just enjoying the moment, Shane has to be the buzzkill, so says Glenn. Ed asks Jenner what the hell's going on. Jenner then tells them what really is going on with wildfire, which is what the virus was called that caused it. He shows what happens to the brain when somebody dies, and then that something is reanimating the brain for only the base instincts of moving and eating. And that is why we have walkers. He also fails to disclose to them that he's about to blow the place up, so once he lets them know this, everybody gets really upset about it. They try to escape. There's no way out. They're trying to hammer steel doors with axes, which isn't going to work. A couple of people in the crew agree with him. There's nothing left in the world. Everything's over with. Andrea decides that she wants to stay. Jackie decides that she wants to stay. Of course, because Andrea stays, Dale, being kind of a creepy, overprotective older man. Dale basically guilt trips Andrea into leaving because he says he's going to stay too. We see the first bit of Rick's negotiating skills, which will come out throughout the rest of the series. He pleads with Jenner saying, look, we just want a chance. Like your wife wanted to give you a chance to solve this thing. We just want a chance. So Jenner's like, all right, I'll open the doors, but you got to find your way out upstairs because I'm not opening up those. Those are locked for good. So he lets them out of the main office. They go run to try to make their escape. And we get our first time of Carol saving the day because earlier in an earlier episode, we saw that she had found this grenade while she was going through things. She kept it. That grenade was something that Rick had picked up in one of the very early episodes after going to the police station, and they make note of it. Again, if you go back and rewatch the series, do you see how they seeded those things throughout the original episodes. They used a grenade to break the unbreakable glass, and they escaped the CDC. Jenner's kind of surprised and impressed by this. Him and Jackie sit there and wait for the oncoming explosion or implosion of the CDC center. Dale convinces Andrea to get up because Andrea doesn't want Dale's death on her conscience, even though she doesn't want to live anymore. They barely escape the explosion, but all of this was preceded by one very important thing that would be paramount for this first phase of the series. Before Rick and crew leave, Jenner pulls Rick aside and whispers something in his ear that we as the audience don't get to hear. You see the reaction on Rick's face, and it would be some time before we found out what exactly Jenner said to him. The crew escapes, everything blows up, the CDC explodes in a very early 2010s CGI graphic explosion for a TV show, which wasn't bad at the time, but it's clearly CGI. You would consider it bad CGI in this day and age. But the crew escapes and they go off into further adventures in the post-apocalyptic world of The Walking Dead. Who do we lose? Well, as with every season of The Walking Dead, you're going to lose some main characters. And in season 1, we wind up losing Ed to walkers, which nobody's going to really cry about. We also wind up losing Andrea's sister, Amy, which was a fairly sad one. And we get to see how somebody's death is really the first time you get to see a personal attachment to somebody dying and watching their loved one turn into a walker. That was done through Andrea and Amy's scene. Jim got lost because during the invasion he got bit in the stomach, so there's really nothing they could do about it. He has a rather drawn out death where he just decides, tie me up to a tree, you guys go on, leave me here, I'll just sit here and maybe or maybe not. He shot himself through the head, we'll never really know. And of course Jackie, who decided to stay with Jenner at the CDC and just, hey look, I don't want to see what's going on in seasons 2 through 10. Maybe she saw the previews and like, I don't want to deal with any of that crap. Y'all have no idea what you're walking into. I'm not going through that. I'm going to include Jenner in this because he has a very important line that will come back at one of the most pivotal moments in the entire series. Even you'll notice it in the titles of some of the episodes. When Rick says, hey, they just want a chance, Jenner responds with this.
Take it.
Grateful.
The day will come when you won't be.
So that's our wrap up of season 1 of The Walking Dead. And yes, this is part 1 of a 2-season arc. Like I said, I break The Walking Dead up into 2-season arcs. This is arc 1, part 1 of arc 1. And season 2, we're going to a farm. A lot of people have a lot of things to say about season 2. I have some different things to say about it, but we'll get to that when we cover season 2 next week on a recap of The Walking Dead, heading into the final season coming up on August the 22nd. But I want to know what you guys think about The Walking Dead. Have you seen The Walking Dead? Are you a fan of The Walking Dead? When was the last time you even saw season 1? Do you remember season 1? Let your voice be heard in the comment box below. Until then, I will see you guys for more news, rumors, and reviews here on the Rantin Review. Have a good day.